to the Antares webinar, the first for 2025. Thank you all for taking the time to join us. We're excited about this one. We're looking at the Microsoft ecosystem for 2025, talking you through what we see as the big things coming up in that future horizon and roadmap. And joining me today in this session from Antares will be Shalab Jain, the Antares Chief Technology Officer, Martin Merrick, who heads up our data and AI practice, along with Janika Amrasekara, who is also our modern work practice lead. So across the stack, we're going to bring you the thoughts of what we saw in 2024, plus all the great things that are coming up in 2025, which we think are the focus areas that you need to be mindful of. And as I said, this one's a really exciting one. We've been sort of looking forward to this one since we sort of turned the year last year. There's some great announcements last year, which I think we can bring to you. And so we're going to have a great time as we talk you through. And at the end of it all, we'll have some time for questions as well. Just a little bit of a reminder for those joining us that may not be familiar with Antares. We are a Microsoft pure play dedicated partner, part of the Cloud Collective, which means that we bring you the boutique skills and all of the care of a particular dedicated specialized business with the scale and depth of a GSI. So make sure you check us out on the website for more information. Just a little touch on our sort of key value propositions as well around what we've done. We've been around for nearly 20 years. For those that don't know, we've been developing, creating, crafting and innovating with our customers for all of that time, completely supported by Microsoft as we've looked through to innovate and pioneer in those areas. And we have a culture that is inquisitive and a hunger to want to develop. So our curiosity to question and ask and understand saw us go live with the first AI bot in education, and that was demonstrated by Microsoft CEO. So we've got a long, rich and varied pedigree in AI, and so we're well placed to bring you some of the great announcements we talk about today as well, so stay tuned for that. But let's get into what we saw in 2024, and I think this is the key one for us in terms of what we had a look at from where our customers were investing in their efforts and energy, and it was a fairly even split across the areas of capability for us. We saw, modern work with a lot of focus in and around document lifecycle management, contract documentation, automation in that space, along with intranets, collaboration, AI search, Copilot. Probably around about 35 to 40% of our customers are really focusing on that area of the sweet spot, making sure that they had those areas covered. We moved across into data, and we saw again around about a third of our customers really focusing on the data stack. That was really around the data state assessments, understanding how to bring certain data domains together. There was a strong focus on Fabric, as you can imagine, sort of going into that first full year of awareness, and people really starting to get their heads around what Fabric offered in the marketplace. That was a great one. Purview made some large-scale progress and gains in terms of capability as it became to a data governance solution. So that was another one there where customers are very interested in understanding how Purview and data governance came together, and as well as the staples of Power BI training, reporting, those sort of areas where we know that if we're going to provide data to users, we need to empower those users to be able to get the best out of it and most out of it, and also move the reliance away from centralized teams. Applications and AI very much around custom Azure apps, portals, integration, their specific services, moving away from large monolithics, more into Azure integration services. Semantic kernel chatbots are more tailored in, more zeroed in. We saw custom copilots. We saw a lot of AI strategy and advisory demand in the market as well. And wrapping all of that, we really saw some good interest around how do we actually get the benefit of a partner for the long term, for the year, and how do we have that managed service that we can call and phone a friend when we need one. So we saw a good demand in that managed service across all of those areas. How do we become that leveraged extension of a team? So customers are wanting to make sure that without having to go to market and hire for technology skill sets which are constantly emerging, how do they leverage an organisation like us to keep both their internal staff at the forefront through that peer-to-peer working relationship, but also be able to reach out to people like ourselves and say, okay, what's happening? What are you seeing in the market across industry, across other verticals? So as we sort of saw that 2024 go past, we also saw some really great announcements coming out from Microsoft towards the end of the year. We had the AI World Tour. We had various different sort of conferences and announcements from Microsoft across different areas. So I think that's really now where we're starting to look at, well, based on what we saw in 2024, what are we looking forward to 2025, and where do we see that the market's going to push us in terms of differentiators for different organizations? Where are we going to see customers getting ready for 2025? Where are they on their transformation curve, adoption curve, and how are they going to leverage? We're now 8 weeks in roughly into this year. We've still got 10 months to go. Where are those thought leaders going to be at the end of the year? Where do you need to be as someone sitting within your own data domain, within your organization, within your own transformation remit, and even within your own function? How do you need to understand where to position your organization or your thought leadership, or start to learn more about to take your organization forward? And that does not sort of come with any sort of real focus on a domain. It's more agnostic across technologies, agnostic against what's happening. How can you leverage that and go forward? So we're going to now start looking at the different areas and what we think are going to be key focus areas for 2025. And at the end of it all, we'll be keen to get your thoughts as well in the Q&A. So hang around, and I'm going to now present to you the different areas of domain expertise that our experts talk about, the key features, the announcements, the particular aspects which are coming in 2025, or where we feel they're going to be good focus areas. So I'm going to pass over to Janika to head us through the particular areas of what he feels are going to be important for 2025, and we'll go from there. Thank you.
Thanks, Greg. Apart from the obvious one around AI, which we'll no doubt cover off today, we're going to see in the modern workspace 4 key trends that will play a big part and a big role in the adoption and success of AI-based tools, right? So the digital age has seen an era of unprecedented data generation, right? With recent estimates suggesting that the Microsoft ecosystem alone is processing over 2.5 exabytes of data daily, right? That amount of data is really incomprehensible. And that immense scale highlights the critical importance around data management, security, and also analytics. So the first big trend that we're going to see in 2025, which is probably not something that's completely new, is around understanding our data, right? With a number of data sources and applications available to our users and organizations, people don't know where to start. Where do I begin? Where does my data live? What are the data sources out there? So it's really important that we can help find where the data lives. Another key thing you're going to see is, where does my data have risks around overexposure? Is my sensitive information at risk of being accidentally leaked through the AI services that we have, or accidentally shared with external users, right? So where does my overexposure lie within my environment? What is my redundant, obsolete, and trivial data? It's a really important way to set parameters around how our data flows throughout the business. Another key one that we're seeing a lot of organizations ask us is my data ready for AI? Do I have the right guardrails in place to ensure that my data isn't leaking and my sensitive information isn't surfaced through AI-based tools, right? So we've probably heard a lot of this from a Microsoft perspective, but AI is going to be the UI to your data. The last one is around, what tools and analytics and processes do I have at my disposal to understand the current data landscape? Where do I even begin around categorizing and defining what risk looks like for my organization? There are some standards, but everyone has nuance in terms of what their risk tolerance is. So where do I begin around that? So it's a lot of tools and a lot of discussion that we're having with our customers around, how do I understand my data? And we'll go into how some of the mechanisms are later on. The next key trend we're going to see is around storage optimization, with the main aim being to reduce my storage cost. However, reducing your storage cost is going to be intrinsically linked to understanding your data itself, right? So there are going to be 2 key ways that organizations will reduce their costs in 2025. First one is leveraging an archiving process and or tooling to move content based on certain parameters, metrics, rules, to cheaper tier of storage, right? This is often seen as the quick win to reduce your storage costs with cloud providers. However, that's not going to solve the long-term pain of increased storage costs, right? So a lot of customers are speaking to us about how do we build a long-term plan around proper disposal of content to reduce your overall cost, whether it be to your tier 1 storage provider or a tier 2 storage provider, which is going to be housing all that information, right? So they're probably going to be 2 key areas that we're going to see customers reduce their storage costs in 2025. The next trend we'll see organizations look to, again, all intrinsically linked together, is AI document management. right? How do organizations look to address the critical challenges that they face around document management? The first one is really, how do I enhance data and automate the security by identifying and mitigating potential risks as they come along? Instead of doing retrospectively around how do I understand my data, how do I put processes and tooling in place to be more proactive in that way? Improving the accuracy in data extraction, processing, and removing and reducing the human error to increase the reliability of information is a really big one, right? How do we let tools do the work? Automation and categorization of indexing, right? There's a large volume of data that we are processing, as I sort of touched on earlier. So how do we make sure that we leverage automation to make that more efficient and drive that automation around content lifecycle to, again, reduce that overall cost of your data storage? How do I streamline the compliance and regulatory requirements, ensuring that documents meet the necessary standards to make sure it's easily auditable? Over the last 10 years or so, the Royal Commission has set a lot of standards and a lot of processes in place for organizations of how they should handle and manage their data. Right, so how do I streamline that process? The last one is around how do I remove the burden of users to understand the ins and outs of document management, records management, information management, letting users worry about doing their work and letting the technology and automation worry about the information management lifecycle. So that's where we're going to see a big shift in leveraging these tools to allow users to focus on the things that they're good at and let the technology focus on doing the things that it's good at. And lastly, we'll see a continued exploration of how organizations improve the relationship with one of their most important assets, being people. Right? It's especially how AI, how we define the ROI beyond the dollar amount invested in AI technologies. Right? So we want to understand how AI can help us as people spend more time with one another. Things like automating routine tasks like summarization of emails, summarization of meetings, giving employees more time to focus on important work. A simple example of this is saving 30 minutes per day, right, which adds up to 2.5 hours per week, which directly links to the next one around improved well-being. So monitoring work patterns and behaviors, for example, detecting long work hours, making sure that managers have insight into how their employees are working to spend more time with them, giving back the 30 minutes a day that they saved by doing their tasks and being just as productive, to focus on mental health, to have that and do that free time with them, right? So we're finding customers exploring ways to give time back to users, not necessarily increase their workload. So using the tools to give that time back. That again directly links to supporting career development, right? Everyone is time poor, especially managers with direct reports. So customers are wanting to explore how managers spend more time with their employees to plan and define their career progression. So that time saved on doing those mundane tasks allows managers and others to spend more time with one another. So it's a really important thing. We're seeing a lot of customers looking to give that time back to them. And the last one is around enhancing the way we communicate, raising the bar almost, right? AI has allowed us to better communicate with one another, better way of writing emails, better way of summarizing information that we may have that typically took us a lot of time and sometimes comes difficult to users. So allowing the tools to allow us to better communicate, better articulate to customers and internal people is a way that we're going to find that we can attract and retain talent as well. So there's sort of the 4 key modern work trends that we're going to see that's going to be the foundations to a lot of the AI discussions that we have. These are the core to us, and we've been trying to solve for a lot of things, but a lot of years now. But in 2025, we're going to see these 4 key areas be top of mind for a lot of our customers from a modern work perspective. I'm going to pass you over to Marty now, who is going to talk about the data stuff.
Thanks, Janica. So I'll be talking about the main trends that we expect to see in 2025. Most of these trends we already started to see emerge at the latter half of 2024. And I see these as the key focus areas for businesses to think about for 2025 as well. Starting with the explosion of real-time insights. So, typically the traditional approach to data management was to centralize into a data warehouse, build some reporting, so operational reporting, whether it's around finance or HR or whatever reporting that was required, in a very static sort of approach, meaning that you build a dashboard based on your requirements at that particular point in time. You pushed it out to your business, and then maybe evolve that over time. But it's a very static approach to looking at data. So it's what we call descriptive analytics, where we look at the history of trends or what's already occurred within that data set. What we saw towards the end of last year is the beginnings of really moving away from the end users jumping into dashboards to look at these trends or look at these static dashboards on a weekly or even daily basis to more of a notification-based approach. So looking at live data, whether that's streaming data or batch data being ingested, but looking at it with trend analytics in mind and looking for certain types of trends, and then creating notifications to those users when a certain benchmark is met or when there's a critical event that occurs. And then at that point is when those users can then go back and have a look at those descriptive analytics dashboards to get further insights. But it's really a move away from that traditional approach of having to log in and having to look at these reports and maybe find nothing for several days. Now towards more of a real-time update approach. We're also seeing a lot of uptake in streaming data, so real-time event-based and IoT sources as well. So, obviously these were already in play for many years in terms of IoT data, but we're seeing a lot more uptake in this sort of real-time streaming data and analytics across time-driven data as well. The second and probably the biggest for me, coming from a data science background, is this convergence of AI and analytics. So as I mentioned earlier, the typical approach is this sort of descriptive analytics approach where you look at trends of data. We saw a lot of convergence particularly in data-driven AI tools to enhance how we're looking at data. So rather than just descriptive analytics or looking at the trends, we're now starting to look at predictive analytics or even prescriptive analytics that provide us insights into not only what may happen based on the data that we've collected, may happen in the future, but what can we do about it? So if there are certain benchmarks not being met potentially as part of those predictive models, what are the factors we can work on to change or move the needle in the right direction? Now, as part of that, there's obviously machine learning models that have come into play. There's LLMs, which I won't talk about too much in this space, but the machine learning models are becoming easier and easier for businesses to develop and use as part of their analytics. And I'll talk about some of the technology that's driving that as well from a data management perspective. The third one is unifying data management. So not only from a data management point of view, so looking at, how do we ingest and manage and transform and use that information, both from a descriptive analytics and predictive analytics perspective, but also now looking at governance and security. So things like Purview, which I'll talk about in a moment. All of these tools from Microsoft are starting to converge and being unified as a single tool set, or have really tight-knit integration between one another. So again, instead of deploying multiple tools, multiple solutions all over the place, having to manage those multiple environments, there's a lot of unification in the technology and in the approach to data management. And we'll see this continuing in 2025. Both from a tool set and from a strategy perspective, it just makes a lot of sense to unify our approach to have a holistic data management strategy. The last one here, and this is an interesting one as well, is this democratization of data. So what that means is really moving away from, again, this traditional approach where IT takes bulk of the responsibility and accountability for data within the organization, both from a management perspective and also from a dashboarding development perspective. So, what you typically see is business has a requirement. Let's say finance wants to create a new report. They go to IT, say, hey, I've got this data set. What can you develop for me from a Power BI perspective? Sometimes we see, trained up Power BI specialists within business groups that will, potentially create some of their own reports. But typically the accountability across data and development of reports and dashboards is majority of the time within IT. And what this democratization of data does is it creates a process by which we can push data assets out to the business that have been validated. And there's a process by which we do that. But those data assets can be from multiple sources and essentially create what's called a data domain that can then be managed by the business themselves. So that means they can leverage those data assets in multiple ways. They can manage the quality of those data assets with some tools that help them actually do that. So that's another important part of the setup. But we're seeing more and more of this push back to the business from an accountability perspective, obviously using tools that help them manage those data assets. Part of these are things like self-service tools. So there's obviously Copilot now. There's various other ways that we can push out a self-service catalog to the business for them to leverage data and reports in all sorts of different ways. For me, the key difference is, again, coming back to LLMs, the approach to language-driven analytics. So providing data assets that have the ability to be asked questions from an LLM perspective. So you can ask questions such as, what were the trends of sales for the last 10 years in my organization? And it's this kind of question and narrative-based approach to investigating and data analytics that we saw emerge in 2024, and I expect this to grow significantly in 2025 with the use of several tools that have already been established but are continuing to evolve as we speak. From a Fabric, so specifically talking about Microsoft Fabric capabilities, and I touched on some of these points already. I think for me, again, from a data science perspective, one of the biggest elements here is going to be the integration between AI and Fabric. So data management and AI in terms of machine learning. That's essentially going to be one of Fabric's biggest development areas for 2025. We're already seeing some of this in terms of making these tools really simple to use, even almost at the business level. So business can provision machine learning models based on, again, sort of real language-based approach where they can ask questions and provide English narratives around what the model should do. And then these models can then be deployed as a machine learning model within your Fabric environment. So we're seeing that as a real emergence in AI. And again, that feeds back into what I was talking about earlier in terms of that data democratization and making these tools available to business so they can leverage these data assets more effectively. The second one, again, sort of real-time data processing. So this is another big area, a growth area for Fabric. There's already obviously a lot of tools available for this. One of the key areas here, I think, is going to be Data Activator and the growth in that space. So Data Activator, as you may or may not already know, is a tool that Fabric provides that allows us to set up a set of rules to monitor our data sets for certain events or certain trends. And these can be across data sets. These can be quite granular in terms of rules we can create, and are quite effective at almost creating a sort of mini machine learning model to isolate and look at trends in your data and then provide notifications to users when certain events or rules are met. So again, moving towards this kind of notification-based data analytics and providing the ability to users to not have to go to a dashboard every day or every week or every month, but be provided the information in real time when and if it occurs. The third piece here, unified governance. So as I mentioned, the whole evolution towards centralizing tool sets, one of the key elements here is going to be the really tight-knit integration between Fabric and Purview. So as, again, you may already know, Purview has a new and greater version of what it was in the past, much easier to use, much more integrated. And this tight integration between Fabric and Purview is going to continue and be enhanced in 2025 as well. So it becomes a real important part of the overall data management story. So it's not just now about Fabric and ingestion of data. It's now a strategic set of tools that we use as part of our data strategy across the organization. And lastly, enhanced Copilot integration. So this is continuing to evolve as well. One of the cool things you may have seen is the AI skills section. Again, sort of this LLM-based data analytics, whereby you can set up or ask questions from your data. The Copilots within Fabric and within Power BI are going to significantly be developed out in 2025 and provide really cool capabilities around business users being able to interrogate their data sets, data assets in all sorts of ways, including what I mentioned earlier, actually building machine learning models using Copilot and obviously pre-configured semantic models that you have in the backgrounds that are validated and cleansed data sets, but really providing that capability, again, pushing that to the business and providing them with the tool sets around having the ability to create these models. So they're for me the key Fabric capabilities. Obviously, there's a whole bunch of tools being announced. If you're interested in further information, the Fabric website has a monthly blog as well. They talk a lot about the specific tool sets and roadmap coming out for Fabric as well. But at this point, I'll pass to Sulab, our CTO.
Thanks, Marty, and thank you all for joining us today. Before I move on, so yeah, I'll be talking about AI and what's happening in the AI space, and one of the biggest shifts that is happening right now is around agents, and they are transforming the way we interact with technology. Before we dive in, let's just take a moment to level set on what exactly are AI agents. So we all know that AI models, especially the large language models, generate content. That's why we call them generative AI. So they take inputs, they predict the best possible response and generate an output. So for example, if you are using GPT-4 through an LLM application, you give it a text prompt, it predicts and generates a response based on the patterns on the data it was trained on. Now, that's a model. An agent, on the other hand, doesn't just generate, it acts. So an AI agent has a set of tools that allow it to take action. So the brain behind the modern AI agents is still an LLM. But now, instead of just responding with text, the agent can call APIs, it can run code, it can interact with software, and even iterate on its own outputs. So let's take an example, a simple example. Right now, you go to an LLM application, you use GPT-4 or take it and ask it to generate a piece of Python code for you. If your prompt is clear, the model will generate functional code for you that you can copy and paste and run yourself. That's the AI model at work, right? It generates code based on your request. Now imagine an agent with access to the right tools. So instead of just generating the code, it can write the code using the LLM, but it can run the code inside maybe a container. It can observe the result and did it execute properly? Were there any errors? It can potentially debug and fix the code if needed. It can iterate until it gets a working version, and then maybe return a final result for you as well. So that's the difference. An agent doesn't just generate, it takes actions, it learns from the result and can adapt. So there's two major differences between an LLM and LLM model and an agent. An agent doesn't just follow a single command. It decides which tools to use, when to use them, and how to respond based on real-time feedback. And it actually makes changes in the world, like running code, like running workflows, making API calls. These are the actions that can have, real-world impact, and which means we need to be very thoughtful about how we design and deploy these agents. Now it goes a level further, and a single agent can be very powerful. But what happens when you have multiple agents working together? And that's basically where a lot of the AI investments are going, and where large organizations are spending quite a bit of money in coming up with multi-agent systems architecture. We are working within Antares on a agent framework as well, based on Azure AI agentic framework, which I'll talk to in a second. So now that we have a foundation on what an AI agent is, let's take it a step further. So when we talk about agents, they can vary in complexity. You can have some simple to quite advanced agents. So a simple agent might be where it's retrieving information from the data sources, answering questions, and reasoning as it answers the questions, etc. You can have agents that can be medium complexity, that can perform a task or an action in automating workflows and repetitive tasks. Or you can have autonomous agents that can operate independently and can work with other agents as well. So now let's talk about agents from a Microsoft perspective, and what is that? How can you develop agents using the Microsoft ecosystem? So the first thing to keep in mind, and Janica touched on this before, is that Copilot is the UI for AI. So if you're investing in the Copilot ecosystem, you can leverage the out-of-the-box agents in Copilot. I'll talk to that in a second. And you can also leverage a large number of third-party available agents in the ecosystem, or you can build your own custom agents using the Copilot, using the Agents Studio as well, the Copilot Studio, I should say. So you have the Copilots that are grounded in the Microsoft Graph data, that have access to all your emails, documents, security, all of that sort of stuff. That's all aimed at personal productivity. But now with the availability of agents, you can also automate your business processes using agents. And you can go from, like I said, you can leverage out-of-the-box agents to low-code, no-code to full-code applications to build the agents as well. So these are the 5 Copilot agents that are coming up in Microsoft 365 Copilot. And these agents are, some of them are already generally available, like the agents in SharePoint. But there are other agents that are coming up, which are going to be helping up with group facilitation, self-service tasks and support with IT systems, HR systems. There are going to be agents around project management and agents that will help us with real-time speech-to-speech interpretation in Teams meetings like these, so one can listen and speak in the language of one's choice. So these are the out-of-the-box agents. Like I said, there is a whole library of other agents that all the big players have built, and you have the ability to leverage them as well. Now, sometimes you will have more complex requirements, and you may want more sophisticated agents. You maybe want more governance around them, and you may want to execute a certain way based on your business processes and in those kinds of things that may go beyond the capabilities of a low-code, no-code platform. This is where you can leverage the Azure AI Agent service, which is a powerful new service designed to help you deploy, scale, and manage AI agents with enterprise-ready capabilities. So an Azure AI Agent service enhances what you can do with AI agents, building on the Assistance API and layering in enterprise essentials like security connectivity, ability to use non-OpenAI models. But more importantly, it makes it much faster to develop these AI-powered agents, reducing development time from months to weeks and sometimes just days as well. So it has a solid foundation of security and governance. There are built-in controls like for security and access controls like ensuring agents only share data users have permissions to tracing and monitoring, so you have full visibility of how agents are performing. But the other thing to keep in mind with agents is that they are, like the AI models that we discussed before, they're limited to only the knowledge that they were trained on or the information they were trained on. But in real world business processes, we need access to be able to obtain real-time data to make decisions, right? So for example, you've got a travel company, you may want to check for potential travel disruptions. Maybe an AI agent can fetch you the latest rail strike or flight cancellations or information on those kinds of things, etc. So you need to be able to not only tap into your data, enterprise data, which may be like Marty mentioned Fabric. So you may want to use Fabric for your structured data for insights. You may have unstructured data in SharePoint, in documents, and so on. You may have data in external systems. You may have data you may want to fetch from trusted sources, like in the travel company's case, maybe it's a TripAdvisor that you may want to know, fetch live information from. So the agents are not only capable of pulling data from multiple sources, but they are capable of intelligently combining the data from these sources to provide you more accurate and comprehensive responses. Now, in addition to that, we have the ability to actually do things. So that can be done with automation tools that are built into the ecosystem, maybe Logic apps, maybe Azure functions, those kinds of things, etc. And then last but not the least, the whole brain behind the agent, like we discussed before, is the large language model. So now we have access to 1,800 models available in Azure AI. And these models go from the latest like DeepSeek to advanced or reasoning models like the O-series models to DALL-E for image generation to maybe the small language models available as well, and then everything in between. So with these tools, AI agents are going to go beyond answering questions. They're going to execute workflows. They're going to automate tasks and help take meaningful actions. So keep an eye out for what's going to happen in the agents world. You're going to hear a lot more about agents, from simple agents to quite complex. And Antaras is doing already quite a bit of work on this with customers already. I'll pass it back now to you, Greg.
Perfect. Thank you, Philip. It's great to see, great to hear. I'm just going to talk you through a little bit more of what the team have talked about, and a little bit more around that holistic ecosystem and bringing the capabilities together, and how 2025 would look if we start to think about agents within our organizations. And so when we start to think about our particular end users, be it customer, staff, frontline workers, students, etc., they will have various and many touch points into our organizations. We will see that their interactions through various channels will create a lot of structured and unstructured data, from emails to call queries to forms, IoT telemetry, user behavior metrics. We will have test scores, we'll have performance results, we'll have certifications and qualifications and competencies. There'll be so many different bits and pieces of data, as we already know today, exist. And rarely do we, in most organizations today, have a way of actually cataloging and going through that data in a meaningful way to actually access it and make use of it. However, that's our sort of ultimate goal as we start to look at how do we bring together all of this unstructured and structured data. We want to be able to find the ability to centralize, to Martin's point earlier, around that unification of data. And how do we then actually surface that in a meaningful way to democratize it? So both bring it together, but then share it out safely. And the important thing then is once we have those insights, they allow us to start to look at it. But what we do need to do then is figure out, to what Shulab touched on, is where is the right information and where can we get the right guidance from the right models to understand what is the right knowledge that we need to look at in terms of driving environmental and organizational specific improvements with an understanding of what's happening globally from these large language models, as well as then understanding what actions should we take as an organization. Where can we actually take in, have an agent, do some sort of action or internally ourselves know that we need to then use this AI and knowledge that we're deriving from all of this information that we've got to actually address important things in our organisation to make meaningful and positive changes in KPIs. Are we looking at cost savings in our organisation? Are we trying to get better ROI? Are we trying to Janika's point, improve staff retention and employee wellness and experience so that we're giving them better tools so they enjoy the job better, they're more productive, more happy? Are we looking at where do we sort of find supply chain savings along that process? There's a lot of information here as we start to look across the enterprise value chain and what we can do. And so we start to look at the Microsoft suite for 2025. We're going to see the key components between the modern work suite of products, Fabric and all the data capabilities, along with Power BI, smart intelligent apps, all coming together across the different domains, along with Copilot, as Shalab touched on, the UI for AI, and Foundry coming together. And Foundry is an important one, as we talked about agents and we talk about the large language models. That's going to provide the interoperability between our different domains and our touch points with customers and internally to help execute certain things to help us with automation. Where does it make sense? Well, it's a use case by use case basis, but it's also how do we actually look at an enterprise holistic view, understanding that macro level and bringing it down to a micro level to where we can actually execute on and improve and deliver those KPI results for the business. And why agents and Foundry are going to be the focus for this year, we know they're enterprise grade. Microsoft spent a lot of time in getting them ready. There's extensive data connections which come out of the box, allowing you to plug and play in many situations of finding the right model for yourself. It's a flexible model selection. It's a rapid deployment. To Shalab's point, we don't need to spend months upon months. Back in the day, you'd want to deploy a bot framework. It would take you from 3 to 6 months. Nowadays, with the tools, we can do that anywhere from 2 to 3 weeks and have that up and running and it's production grade ready and it's secure and it's locked in your environment. That enterprise readiness is important for cybersecurity and making sure that our leaders and our execs and our business and our staff feel comfortable that the data is right and that it's safe within the ecosystem. And there are also a whole bunch of extra tooling and product integration with Foundry that's coming this year. So keep an eye out on that as well. And as Shalab touched on earlier, you'll see this here, which is the Azure AI Foundry page. At the moment, there's 1,800 odd models available for you. You can look across and see the various different types of categories and verticalization and specialization. You can look at these models as well. So have a look at that and see, you're able to sort of look at the different types of models and evaluate if it works. What to use and when is a similar question across every single domain of Microsoft. It doesn't matter whether it's Fabric and data, it doesn't matter whether it's collaboration, Teams, SharePoint, and modern work. It does not matter if it's in apps, and if we're talking about functions and logic apps and integration services. The what to use and when question does not change in AI as well, and it's why customers are coming to us to understand what AI solution makes sense for my workloads, what AI guardrails do I need in place for what solutions, how do I best implement this with a long-term view of securing strategy, securing the guardrails, securing the organisation for the long term, but also enabling productivity and efficiencies and driving those ROIs back to customers, back to staff, those sort of areas. And often the question we get is, well, where do we start? And it's just a little reminder for those on the call today that over 90% of you qualify for some sort of technology enablement funding from Microsoft to help understand how. And that could be in the forms of business case funding, building, that could be assessments, migration planning, proof of values, pilots. So there's already a pathways which you're qualified for, ready to go in and start to do some of this ideation. And we sit here in February looking at the impending turn of the financial year where you've got a good position to be able to go, let's start looking at how do we build a business case for 2026? Where does this going to fit on our roadmap? Where does this fit on our strategy, on our horizon? How do we bring this into our thinking now? Because we know the executive, we know the organisation's going to start saying even more and more, like the noise has been happening for the last 2 years, where are we ready for AI? Marty touched on it earlier around Fabric. Being AI enabled is key. Janica touched on it in modern work around the AI assisted document management and classification and tagging and SharePoint, and where the tools within the actual native capabilities exist, or where can we actually extend them by the use of agents and AI. So make sure you are aware and look at particularly where within those specific domains you can understand how to get going with some of these that can roll up into that enterprise view of benefits, but also specifically deliver on key use cases and workflows. And just a reminder from your program specific, there are different ways to start this, from data and storage optimization in modern work, employee experience and collaboration, AI-assisted document management, co-pilots, information management, document architecture and governance, the whole life cycle of document management in your organization for retention from cradle to grave in terms of documentation, data and AI between fabric readiness assessments and data governance, data unification, strategy, AI-driven insights and reporting, assessment programs, specifically then dealing into apps and AI for those that really want to get into intelligent apps, intelligent app modernization, and how to leverage the smarts of Copilot, smart custom agents, and things like the Qbot Accelerator program that we have here in Antares, where you can get up and running relatively cheap within a couple of weeks with a simple work use case, preloaded models, and you're enabled straight away with AI securely in your environment. So it's a little bit of a call to action around all of you, just to be aware that there are funding programs available, and to leverage them, because of part of your relationship with Microsoft gives you access to those, and they're there for your own benefit to understand your options going forward to help make an informed decision around your strategy and your roadmap for 2025 and beyond. So I know we've done a lot of talk, so I'm just going to pause here now and see if there's any questions from the audience around what we've touched on. I know we've tried to go a little bit broad, but also bring it back in terms of some of those focus areas. There's probably lots we could have talked about in this session, but as the first of the series for the year, we just want to sort of set the scene and see how you found that. If there's any questions, feel free to start popping them in the chat. I'm more than happy to go through those and have the team answer them, as well as also if there's anything in terms of what you would like to see us focus on in future series as well and go deeper into, more than happy as well. Just while we wait for any of those sort of questions to come up, maybe I will throw one out to you, Marty. You talked about data and being ready from data from an AI perspective. When do you feel and when do you know the right time is for deploying AI workloads in that sort of data lifecycle?
Yeah, great question, Greg. So thanks for that. This is actually a recurring question from last year that I had almost every meeting with new customers. So it's one of those elements where obviously AI is a very exciting new space. A lot of CIOs, CEOs want to evolve into that space as quickly as possible. And whilst, look, it makes sense to investigate and to deploy POCs and to explore these options, I think there's also importance in setting the foundations in the right way as well, right? So when you start to productionize some of these workloads, a lot of it relies on accurately triaged data. And of course, there's a process by which we can achieve that, right? So I think that's where the foundations and things like Fabric are really important, to be able to triage, ensure that you have high data quality going into these machine learning models, and also evaluate them for bias as well. So there's a whole range of things that need to happen before just throwing a whole bunch of data at a model and expecting accurate outcomes. So whilst, yes, you can certainly explore use cases, and that makes sense from a business perspective to see, okay, what's going to make sense for us? It's also important in parallel or even before to set up the foundations of your data management, ensure that you have high data quality, and then use that data to generate those predictive and prescriptive insights. Yeah.
With those solutions being deployed then, Marty, how do we know as businesses that the business is actually getting the benefits?
Well, that's a good question, right? So obviously we need to set up benchmarks around success. So what does success look like from a particular model? So if we're looking at predicting certain results or optimizing certain processes, we need to define, well, what do we expect the success to look like, and then strive towards that. So oftentimes when we're creating these models, you don't get the end result right away. It's an evolution. It's something, that's why it's called data science, right? So it's a science and a process that goes into that. So you can create something and deploy something with fairly high accuracy, but then evolve that over time and ensure that you have those success measures and you're always comparing against those to see, well, actually, is this model actually providing us any benefit, right? So I think those are probably the key things there.
Perfect. No, and I think I'll probably throw that same question over to Janica in the modern workplace, because whilst you're talking about custom models, Marty, and data and AI, we know that co-pilots, being deployed and there are solutions out there. Our modern workforce are using them. So how do we know that our modern workplace is actually driving the full benefits from co-pilot solutions, agents, those sort of things?
I think from a modern work perspective, what we're seeing mostly is around how do we define and articulate our ROI, again, beyond the dollar value, right? So how do we make sure that we're defining the use cases that AI can help solve? Because there's going to be a good scenario and a good use case for where M365 Copilot will solve a general problem or a general use case, but it's going to transition towards more persona-based use cases where a user specific to their task will need to do and execute on something. So having the data set that is aligned to that user's role to make sure that we can have a persona that is going to help them, right? So I think that's probably the key thing as well, having a clear understanding of what the scenarios are where AI can help, and differentiating, as Greg mentioned before, knowing what tools to use when, right? Because there are going to be a time and place to use Copilot, there'll be a time and place to use a agent-based solution or a custom solution, right? So I think that's the key thing. And it's going to be an evolving thing as well. I think what we've seen a lot of customers do over the last probably 18 months since M365 Copilot was released is that they've realized that the investment beyond just deploying the tool is really important. So investing in people, investing in ongoing training, ongoing support is really important. So that's where a lot of people are going to be investing their time and money is the ongoing support of it, right? It's not front of mind. People slip back into old habits and don't use the tooling that we've created.
Oh, very important points. I think that user education and that monitoring and also advice and guidance is probably key. And it's probably an interesting question as well with 2025, and we're sort of predicting a lot of exploration and I suppose, divergence down the path of co-pilots and agents, in particular agents. Probably question the Shulab as the CTO in terms of how you advise organizations to manage the use of agents and any of the sort of key call outs there, because with 1,800 different models in a library of Foundry, we could see everyone going, it's a bit of an Oprah. Everyone gets an agent, you get an agent, we all get an agent. And so many business processes could be automated. What's the thoughts and how would you advise other sort of C-level, C-suite people to look at agents?
I think the first and the foremost thing from my perspective is that we need to have a very clear AI strategy and a governance framework. And that sets the path around how do we want to use the technology? Do we want to use the technology for internal productivity? Do we want to use it for, like we talked about today, for business process automation? Or were we talking about more about bringing dollars in or saving costs or improving profitability, whatever it might be? And it could be a combination of all of those things as well, but it needs to be clearly articulated in an AI strategy. The other thing with these, like Greg mentioned, you can absolutely go rogue with these things very, very quickly. And so the strategy needs to have a strategic approach towards the reusability and of high quality, proven AI solutions that you may have developed using within the organization. Of course, if you're leveraging a platform like a Copilot, etc., you still need an overall strategy, because that is not going to be the only AI platform you're probably going to work with. Most vendors have some sort of AI coming in to their systems, and they're mostly aimed at improving productivity, doing more with their tooling and all that sort of stuff. But it's more about understanding what do we want to leverage AI for, and how do we remove where Greg's going creating his own agent. I've got a similar agent that does something different. My agent runs 24/7, costs an arm and a leg. Greg's one is more sensible, maybe runs once a week. We need to make sure all of those controls are in place. Security is going to be very, very important, because especially with agents coming up, you can do things with agents. Like there are consequences. It's not just retrieving information, not just answering a question for you, etc. So there's going to be a whole heap of things to be considered from an AI strategy and governance perspective that needs to take into account a whole range of things, including governance models, policies, security compliance, cost management, resource allocation, and the continuous monitoring and the refinement of all of these things. Like I think Marty mentioned, with all of these AI solutions, because the technology is developing so fast, you never stop. You are constantly iterating, you're constantly making these things better, etc. So I wouldn't think that we prepared a solution and we're done. We're never done. And that's some of the things and some of the philosophies we've actually incorporated in our Qbot platform as well. But before you even start with platforms, my recommendation is to have a clear strategy and governance model.
And look, I've seen you work with various partners, Shalab, in terms of forming and setting up the AI working groups and those establishments of those bodies internally to help oversee and manage the establishment of AI policies, procedures, and those sort of things. So is naturally Agents and Foundry going to fall in under those sort of working groups that you've seen that help charter in other organizations?
Yeah, so I mean, it's never a clear-cut case of, we're going to use Azure Foundry for everything. It's probably not going to be that case. You're going to use a whole bunch of tools and technologies. Maybe you want to actually start with M365 Copilot, see what out-of-the-box Copilots can do. Of course, you need to balance that out with your licensing costs. How many people are you going to license for Copilot? Then we need to start and understand, okay, well, what can we do with low-code, no-code tools? What value can we add to the organization? Can we solve high-quality use cases with that, or do we need to have a strategy again with these tools about what sort of use cases we want to tackle? And then, of course, we need to then take into account, where Foundry comes in and those kinds of things. With all of these things, strategy, governance, but also again, Janika touched on this before, use cases, right? You're not going to solve every single thing. You're not going to solve every single problem. You will need to basically balance this out with what ROI we're going to get if we invest in this. And that's going to be key and very, very important. And that's where we're providing a lot of guidance to a lot of customers around this sort of space as well, because it's not very clear for customers about where they start, what should they focus on, where should they invest, and we're providing that strategic advice and guidance as well.
Perfect. It's a very, very good point, a very salient point. And I sat on a call with Microsoft Singapore a bit earlier in the week, and probably Janika, one of the things that came up was around that aspect of there's still concerns in the market around, well, if we deploy Copilot or an agent, we're going to surface up information that a user shouldn't see. So it's still first principles, isn't it, Janika? And that Copilot is not changing security principles. It's still the fact that if a Copilot surfaces up information that a user can see, there's a problem with information architecture and your policies and rights. Correct?
Yeah, correct. Exactly right. So the fundamentals of best practice around how we manage the platforms, whether it's from a model work, a data perspective, still apply, right? As we sort of touched on before, Copilot is going to be the UI to AI. So making sure those best practices are in place, using the tools available, either first party or for third party from a platform perspective, to ensure that you have the right governance structure, classifications in place to make sure that you're going to get the best experience out of your AI experience. The key thing is as well is that it shouldn't slow you down from a technical perspective just because there are challenges from your environment and your data. There are ways that we can help in terms of excluding certain data sources from the experience, right? To make sure that we can still get the benefit out of it, start getting people to use what AI can do to help them while we remediate in the background, right? So it shouldn't be a scary activity in terms of, is our environment fully ready for AI? I think you're never really going to be. It's about how do we understand where the risks lie so that way we can take the appropriate risk in deploying these solutions.
No, perfect. Good points. And it's a very sort of, again, fitting comment in terms of that we can get started, we can move ahead, and we can drive forward without feeling like we're not flying in the face of adversity when it comes to security risk and those sort of things. So very, very good point. So I thank everyone for joining me from the Antari side for today. Thank you all on the line that's joined in for this webinar or maybe watching it on replay later on. Thank you for taking the time to sit through this. You've made it to the end of the big thank you. Just a reminder as well for you all that there are technology enablement programs available from Microsoft. So reach out to us today. Contact details are there, and you have the ability to reach out to us and find out what you may be eligible for in terms of getting started, either reduced cost, no cost, shared cost. Looking forward to hearing from you as well and what you may want to see in the next sessions. But as you can see, 2025 promises to be a great year. Microsoft's really focused in on some areas. We'll keep bringing you thought leadership, and we'll also bring you what's happening from the trenches as well as we go through this series throughout the year. So stay tuned, keep joining us, and we'll keep looking forward to keeping you informed as we roll in towards this year. And hopefully lots of exciting innovations are coming from, and we want all of you guys to be at the forefront of it. So let us know where we can help. Thank you all. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.